LNG Aquarius. Mission: to transport liquefied natural gas from Indonesia to 4 discharge terminals in Japan. 936 feet in length, she carries 125,000 cubic meters of LNG in her 5 spherical tanks. The LNG Aquarius is the first U.S. flag vessel of this size to successfully complete full cargo loading and discharge of LNG. She is one of a fleet of American LNG carriers in service today, operated by the Energy Transportation Corporation. As energy sources become scarcer and the need for energy increases, LNG carriers are becoming of increasing importance to the world. It is little wonder that special care is taken to operate these ships as safely and efficiently as possible. Under normal conditions, this is a safe ship to operate and a good environment in which to work. In the unlikely circumstance that a fire might occur, crew members are alerted to methods of fire control and prevention. It is important that all members of the crew be aware of the kinds of fire which might occur, the location of firefighting equipment aboard the ship, and the special firefighting techniques required to handle each type of fire. An LNG spill at a manifold such as this could result in a fire. Methane vapor vented during warm-up operations is a potential source of fire. A rupture in a diesel oil loading line could spill flammable oil on deck. In the compressor room or the bilge area, oil might also leak out and accumulate on the deck. In the paint locker, cans of flammable paint could spill. The galley with its cooking grease is a potential source of fire. Leaking flanges, ruptured fittings, and leaking valves are all potential sources of fire. To control such fires, if they should occur, these LNG ships have fire suppression equipment installed at strategic locations. There are seawater systems on deck and in the engine room. Hand-portable CO2 and fixed CO2 systems in the engine room and compressor room. And both hand-portable dry chemical and fixed skid-mounted dry chemical extinguishers throughout the ship. On deck, there are 4 SK3000 fire suppression systems with hose stations mounted on the unit, and 1 or 2 remote hose stations supplied for each system. 2 systems with remote hose stations only, and 2 systems with fixed turrets, which can be actuated at the unit or in the cargo control room. For this equipment to be effective, it is necessary for crewmen to know precisely how to use them if needed. For that reason, personnel assigned to this vessel have an opportunity to attend a special firefighting school to receive several days of thorough instruction and practice in fighting the kinds of fire they might encounter aboard their ship. To avert undue injury, every member of the crew should know the characteristics of each type of fire they may encounter and the specific procedures to follow in combating them. Their instructors are representatives of the Ansell Company, which manufactures most of this equipment, as well as the dry chemical used in it. Several hours are spent in the classroom learning the theory of firefighting. But most of the action takes place outside on the fire training grounds.
Cartridges that you'll find alongside the hose reel, as you see on this one right here.
The first fire they'll deal with is a spill fire. You'll recall that on the ship, this might occur at a leaking manifold, for instance. The technique to use is a wide sweeping motion, left and right, at the base of the fire where the fuel is. If you hold the nozzle too high or don't sweep the full width of the fire cannot be extinguished. For this type of fire, hand-portable dry chemical extinguishers are usually quite adequate. There is one of these available in the emergency locker, right under the manifold area of the ship. A spill fire might occur in an area where there are obstacles, such as piping or stanchions. This type of fire often requires 2 people working together as a team.
Wider to left, wider to left. There you go, and stop.
Next, they learn how to handle a fuel in depth fire. where the fuel might be several inches deep. You might have this kind of fire in the bilge area where oil has been spilled, and you have oil floating on top of the water. As before, you use a rapid side-to-side sweeping motion to be sure you cover the full width of the fire. But be careful that you don't impinge directly onto the liquid with your dry chemical, because that causes splashing and increases vaporization, and thereby increases the combustion rate. You direct the nozzle toward the surface of the fuel. This kind of fire could also occur in the compressor room on the ship. Lube oil might leak out from equipment and accumulate in the bilge. With practice, there is more success, and confidence grows. Although it is unlikely that you'll need to recharge your hand portable, the ship is nevertheless equipped for this operation, and all personnel should be familiar with it. At the school, everyone lends a hand refilling the extinguishers with dry chemical in preparation for the next series of fires. The next demonstration is a gravity flow fire. This might occur near machinery where lube oil or fuel oil is leaking and flowing onto the deck. Start first by sweeping horizontally across the fuel on the deck, and then move up toward the fuel, maintaining a horizontal sweeping motion. But don't turn away from the fire. It may flash back. That's doing it right. This might be a paint locker on the ship. Cans of paint could spill and provide fuel for another type of spill fire. The proper technique to use here is an up and down sweeping motion. Each man gets his turn, and confidence continues to grow.
Okay, gentlemen, the next fire we're going to be running is going to be pressure fires. Fire we're going to be running behind me here now is the liquid propane. One point of caution before we really get into fighting fires of this type of nature: pressure fires themselves are not that difficult to extinguish, but they create another problem when you do extinguish them. In most cases, gentlemen, when you start talking pressure fires, you have to be extremely careful what you do when you do extinguish it, or maybe your real question is, should I really extinguish the fire? In a pressure fire situation, especially when we start talking liquid propane, being that the stuff is heavier than air, once I put that fire out and I cannot shut off the source of fuel, I may end up with a bigger hazard now than I had when I actually had it burning. And when you come across a pressure fire, your first concern is not normally extinguishment. My first concern is, how do I shut that source of fuel off? How do I stop that stuff from coming out of there after I put it out? All right? So your first concern in a pressure fire should be not extinguishment, but control. In this case here, if we had a fire of this nature, we find the valve, shut the valve off, apply water to the surrounding area to keep everything cool, and just allow the thing to burn itself out if that's possible. Now, there are times, of course, where this can't be done. There are times, of course, when you have to cap it. You have to somehow put it out and put a cap on it. You have to save the life. Or maybe the valve happens to be in the fire there. The only way to shut the valve off is put the fire out, all right? This is why we're going to show you how to extinguish a pressure fire. Now, this particular one here, we call it the impinging jet. We're working with liquid propane, and it's very important to remember, because if we were working with just the vapors, they'd go out very easy. Once we start working with propane now, of course, that expands quite drastically from when it actually comes out. And what we've got here is, you can see the fire itself now, coming out of a small pipe right here, and it's going to be impinging off of that plate. If we took that plate away from there, it'd be a very easy fire to put out. All you would have to do is introduce your dry chemical into the escaping gas. The gas will then carry it. All right, with the plate there, it just makes a little bit added problem, because we have to be a little bit more accurate in what we're doing. Which now brings us to point, pressure fires. How do you fight them? Always start at the source in most cases. Start at the source and work from there. All right? In this particular case, we'll be standing back here. Our source happens to be there. We're going to form two lines, one on each side of this pipe. From this point here, we'll open up our stream of dry chemical, more or less right off the hip, introduce our dry chemical at this angle, entering our stream of chemical at that point there. You want to try and get the chemical into the fire before it's actually burning, or into the gas, really. From that point, the gas carries it to the plate, spreads it out.
On the ship, this kind of fire might happen at a leaking flange, a broken valve, or a break in an instrumentation line, or any time liquid is under pressure. This is another type of pressure fire, which might occur at a broken valve in the vicinity of the catwalk. The technique of fighting a fire such as this is to extinguish the ground fire first to prevent reignition. Then hit the flame and go up with the flame. Again, be careful that you back away from the fire when you think you have it extinguished. Never turn your back on it. And have your extinguisher ready in case the fire flares up again. Now we're ready to work with the large skid unit, the SK3000, which is the type installed aboard the ship. The pressurizing gas used with this unit is nitrogen, which is stored in these cylinders. Let's see how a unit such as this actually works. The pressure of nitrogen within the cylinder is indicated by a gauge. When the cylinder valve is opened, nitrogen passes through the high-pressure hose to a regulator, which allows nitrogen to enter the dry chemical chamber at the desired pressure. Safety relief valves on the regulator prevent excess pressure of nitrogen from entering the chamber. From the regulator, the nitrogen flows through a low-pressure hose and piping into the chamber, where it fluidizes the dry chemical. When the nozzle is opened, the dry chemical flows up the pickup tube, through the hose, and out the nozzle. The exact procedures required to activate and maintain this unit are described in step-by-step detail in the Operation and Maintenance Manual, which is available aboard the ship. You are urged to review them periodically. In preparation for fighting the next fire with the SK3000 unit, run the entire hose off the reel. In that way, you help reduce possible friction loss of the dry chemical in the rolled-up section. Be sure that the nozzle is securely closed. The system can be activated by an actuator located at the hose reel. In this case, however, the unit is pressurized by opening the individual nitrogen cylinder valves in the rack assembly. Detailed instructions are clearly illustrated in the operation manual. Since there is air in the hose at the start, if you were to point the hose at the fire, you'd blow air into the fire instead of the extinguishing agent. So first, point the nozzle up. Open the nozzle valve gradually and leave it open until you get a good stream of chemical coming out. Then shut it off. Now we're all set to tackle the fire. We're about to control a large spill fire. A fire such as this could happen at the manifold of the ship. Though we're using gasoline as fuel here, this is about the size of an equivalent LNG fire. The same sweeping horizontal motion is used. That man turning his back and walking away from the fire could be in big trouble. That's the way to do it. The next fire is an overhead flange type of fire. Such a fire could occur where there is potential for flammable liquid leaking from a failure in overhead piping. The technique here is to start at the source of the fuel first, then work down and get the ground fire. This fellow doesn't quite have it. You must put out the fire at the source of the fuel first. That does it. This is a large spill fire requiring a team of men to fight it. When confronted by a fire, a man must think about what is the best way to handle this particular fire. What extinguisher is best? Can I handle it alone, or should I get help? In this case, two men with two hoses can put out 3 times as much fire as a man working alone. We are now going to work with LNG itself, learning how to handle its vapors and how to extinguish any possible fires. Apart from the problem of fire, every person dealing with LNG should be aware of other hazards. If you come in contact with the liquid, you may receive a freeze burn. If you come in contact with a cold surface which has been affected by LNG, treat it as a frostbite. If you find vapor escaping from the liquid, be aware that this can cause suffocation. So watch for vapor leaks aboard the ship.
Now, the first thing we're going to be doing here is the dumping. I'm going to show you what water will do as far as vapor control. All right, now you can get into a couple of arguments, I suppose, with this, depending on who you talk to. Myself, working with LNG, I feel that if you work with a water fog, you can do a pretty good job.
The drift of the LNG vapor cloud is important. Water can be used to control the vapor cloud because water warms the LNG vapor, and warm methane, being lighter than air, just rises instead of hugging the ground. In the event that you have an LNG leak aboard the ship, use a water hose to push the vapor away from any source of ignition. The vapor itself is combustible. If you have an LNG fire, do not use water, because water warms the LNG, making it vaporize faster, increasing the fire's intensity. You use dry chemical to put out an LNG fire. LNG, you can see, burns with a smokeless flame, which is one way you can distinguish it from a gasoline or oil fire. Before winding the hose onto the reel, it must be blown down so that no chemical is left to block the hose. First, close the nitrogen cylinder valves. Open the nozzle, pointing it up and downwind. It takes about 4 to 6 seconds for the chemical to clear the unit. There are 3 basic SK3000 units on board, and each requires a different blowdown procedure. So check the equipment operation manual for the exact procedures. If done improperly, the unit may not be ready when needed. Everyone lends a hand getting a new supply of dry chemical for the remaining fire demonstrations. Each man should know how to operate and recharge the SK3000. The instructor briefs the crew on operation of the SK3000 system, which they will later review in detail with the equipment operation manual, which is available on the ship.
I have to pump in the cartridge. It turns inside this cabinet you see here. There are 6 nitrogen cylinders, 400 cubic foot. All right? Now we require 1 400 cubic foot cylinder for every 500 pounds of dry chemical. That kind of can tell you also then if you ever come across one of these things, you look at the number of cylinders, it'll tell you how big a unit you've got. 6 cylinders, of course, 3,000 pounds. I want you to set this unit up in a hose clean-out position. Go through the procedure you would go through checking out that hose. Go ahead. Now, don't say anything, just let him go by himself.
It is important that all crewmen be familiar with these procedures.
Okay. Does everybody agree with him? Okay? Set it back up in the standby.
Back to firefighting. This is a horizontal jet fire, a pressure fire. Hit the source of the jet and follow the flame out. It is unlikely that you'd ever have a fire this big on the ship, but it's conceivable. And now a vertical jet fire. We must remember that what we are practicing here is basically first aid firefighting, meant for relatively small fires. We have to know what kind of fire we can handle with this equipment. We must be able to locate the equipment directly and apply the agent using the proper techniques to extinguish the fire as quickly as possible. You can't sit around and speculate how to do it. You have to make quick and correct decisions to apply this stuff before the fire gets too big. Detected early enough, it is possible to control any of the fires shown in this film using the proper techniques and the equipment on board the ship.